Hello and good morning. Welcome to the Global Digital Development Forum. My name is Priya Vora. I'm the Managing Director of the Digital Impact Alliance. It's 3:30 in the morning here in Washington, D.C., and normally I would be in bed, but I have this fantastic opportunity to speak one-on-one with Sherpa Amitabh Kant of India. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today. I'm so thrilled to have this time with you.
Thank you, Priya. Lovely interacting with you.
Well, I know you have a very, very busy schedule. You're on the global stage these days, representing India as the chief negotiator in G20 discussions. And for this audience, we're very keen to understand how DPI came to be one of the priorities for India during its presidency. So maybe you can give us a little bit of background and why it's such a priority.
So Priya, it's born out of our own experience and how we've been able to transform lives of citizens in India. And if you look across the world, today 4 billion people do not have a digital identity across the world. Close to about 2 billion people remain unbanked, and almost 133 countries have no digital payment system. And this highlights the severity of digital gap that exists. And this leads to actually cascading socioeconomic inequity. And this highlights the need for transforming governance and catalyzing sustainable and equitable growth through digital and financial inclusion. We saw in India that once we provided digital identity, we provided a bank account, and we could link them with the digital identity number and the mobile number. All the fast payments started happening digitally, and everyone in tier 2, tier 3 cities and rural areas do fast payments. They don't have to go to physical banks. They don't have to use their debit credit card. And secondly, we were able to put resources from 600 schemes straight into the bank account of the beneficiaries without any leakages. When I was a young officer, there used to be massive leakages. We stopped all that.
All the sticky fingers in the middle.
Yeah, that's it. Right into the bank account. And therefore, digital infrastructure has now become indispensable for society. And digital public infrastructure is now critical for providing accessible and affordable technologies to uplift people. And our own experience was that India has probably the world's best digital public infrastructure model. And the presidency has aimed to strengthen its competency, by collaborating with other G20 nations on a topic of mutual interest. And we want to take this model to countries of the global south.
Well, indeed, it has transformed society. I was struck just a couple of weeks ago being in South India with you and seeing a lady on the street who's selling just trinkets for 30, 50 rupees at a time, willing to take phone pay. And, that's just a sea change from a decade ago when financial inclusion was still a distant dream. But, of course, India is not just talking about how digital infrastructure can transform society and economies, but you're really basically giving the message that the public sector, government needs to be setting the rules of the road and has a real role to play in driving inclusion and innovation and competitive markets.
So Priya, if you look at the first 2 decades of the 21st century, some of the big tech companies like Google, Amazon, Meta, Apple, Microsoft have been at the forefront of massive explosion in innovation and value creation. They have billion-strong user bases and a community market value of around 7 trillion. They dominate the global sphere in digital advertising, commerce, messaging, cloud infrastructure, social media, and mobile operating system, and generate huge revenues in the process. In Europe, they adopted GDPR, but GDPR focused on privacy, but impacted innovation. In contrast, India has adopted a very unprecedented and a powerful new approach in policy governance through the adoption of digital public infrastructure. This enabled India to build the railway tracks on which we've allowed private sector to innovate and private sectors competed. So this has enabled India to digitally leapfrog with the public sector keeping public interest. When you talk about public sector, we're talking about public interest. They play the key role in defining the regulatory guardrails. And then we allow the private sector to compete in the market space on top of that. So if you look at it, in India, you have about 40 different startups competing on fast payments. You have a number of startups which have gone unicorn giving credit, which is cashless, paperless. Then you have a number of startups like Zerodha, Upstock, etc., which provide wealth management. Zerodha owns 28% in the stock market today. They do a lot of wealth management for people from Tier 2, Tier 3 cities, which is cashless, paperless. And then you have insurance companies like Digit and Acco, which provide digital insurance, in matters of seconds. So, like the Bank of International Settlement has said, that on account of digital public infrastructure, India has delivered in 10 years what would have taken 50 years to achieve.
Yeah. Well, so Sherpa Kant, I'm so thrilled that you...
One point I want to make is that these public digital platforms are all open source. They have open APIs. They have open standards for interoperability. And they leverage public data for open innovation models. And these low-cost and inclusive platforms are, based on the principles of consent-based data sharing protocols. And, it's all consent-based. The data belongs to the individual citizen. So he gives consent in a legal manner. And this has led to a lot of more innovation taking place.
Yeah, well, I'm so glad you made a few of these points. Let me just repeat so that the audience didn't miss it. When you say DPI, the P in your mind does not mean publicly run and maintained always, but it's really about designing with the public interest. And I think that's a great clarifying point. And I'm also thrilled on behalf of Dial that you talked about the data exchange layer, because in my mind, that is perhaps the most transformative part of all of it, is that you're really unlocking data as a strategic asset for people to benefit. And in this new data economy where governments get access to data and can make smarter policies, and certainly companies are monetizing data, or at least data insights, people also need to fare well in the data economy. So thank you for making those points. Okay, I'm going to turn us to the negotiating room. Tell us what it's like in the closed door sessions during the G20. Does this topic ever even see the light of day, or is it overshadowed by the war in Ukraine, the growing tensions between US and China? How is this being received?
So India's G20 priorities are very distinctive. We would like them to be the problem solvers for the world, with DPI being an important pillar of these strategies. I believe the current geopolitical concerns arising out of concerns in Russia, Ukraine, are well positioned to be discussed in the United Nations General Assembly and not in G20. G20 is a premier forum to discuss economic and developmental issues and not issues of war and conflict. And in terms of your question, India's DPI model is far different from, if you look at it, why it's important for this to be in the negotiating room and not get overshadowed by larger geopolitical issues is because DPI model is far different from tech alternatives available in other countries. And these key differences are about low-cost development and accessibility, simple, open, and interoperable design, and very large-scale adoption to population scale at low cost and its big reach. These are very, very important. And DPIs really help us to achieve very multifaceted outcomes of inclusion, both digital and financial, delivery of social services, ensure that there is no monopolization in the digital space, ensure that there is security, privacy, and governance, ensure that private sector is a key player in innovation and is able to then build platforms which deliver public services and more like insurance and loans, etc. And these are all public sector apps which are built on the India stack, which is a public interest owned layer of data, and that there should be no government monopoly, and government should not play any excessive role and should not have any monopoly over apps, and it should be totally competitive for private players. This is very important. There should be competition for private players. Then only will you have more and more innovation.
So, to the extent you're able to really bring the G20 around the topic of DPI, what exactly is success? What are the specific deliverables that you want to bring to the world?
Well, my view is that the world, if you want the world to make the most of this digital age, it needs a very well-crafted national digital strategy. And, the world needs to focus on empowering its citizens to leverage their digital identity. Digital identity is critical in some form or the other. Every country may be having digital identity, whether it's a driving license or a library card or something. And achieving digital inclusion requires accessible and affordable access to internet, mobile data, and electricity. India has the cheapest mobile data rates in the world, and our digital revolution is powered through 1 billion plus smartphones. And these successful examples from, experiences from India, like what we've done in terms of, the JAM Trinity and the Unified Payment Interface (UPI), which then supported what we did during the COVID period through COVID, and then how we have enabled marketplace competition. Many Paytm and Google Pay, and there have been private sector innovations on top of it by many private sector companies like Google, Zerodha, Digit, many of them. So our view is that the successful experience of India should be replicated globally to drive global financial inclusion and digital inclusion.
Okay, so I'm going to maybe pose an uncomfortable question here, but when you say you want to replicate the India model globally, there would be some skeptics who hear that and think there's some commercial gain here. What do you say to those kind of skeptics? Commercial gains on the part of Indian industry.
Our objective is to ensure that we are able to help the countries of the global south without any commercial benefit. Our objective is that we should be able to ensure that our experiences should help them, the other countries of the world, to build a common framework for DPI globally. We should ensure that the basic functionality of DPI inherently remains to be interoperable, accessible, and affordable in all countries. We should have a repository of all existing and upcoming DPIs built by G20 member countries to ensure that best practices are adopted. And we should mobilize financing to help low and middle income countries design, build, and regulate inclusive, interoperable, and secure DPIs, as DPIs require countries to invest not only in technologies, finance, and human resources, but, so we are here to assist and support the rest of the world in a totally non-commercial manner, but this is the way to go forward.
So those are three very specific things. There's a framework for scaling and global DPIs or DPIs globally, really creating a repository of existing solutions and experiences, and then mobilizing resources. Is this the time to be trying to raise money? There's a lot going on in the world. How is that part of it going?
So our view is that we are discussing with the G20 countries. We are trying to evangelize right now. We are trying to educate. We are trying to say that The DPIs will provide a secure, reliable, and accessible digital infrastructure that will help citizens and businesses, that will help us to leverage the power of technology, that will help us to improve government efficiency, enhance transparency and accountability, and foster innovation and growth. So we are in the process of uh, educating people on the benefits and how to deepen inclusion, improve
Right.
efficiency of service delivery, and solve the challenges of the world by leveraging technology.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's so much to learn from India, but everyone's going to be a little bit different, and just in terms of their journey, and we're certainly seeing that in our work here at Dial. So I want to talk a little more personally. You referenced this in the beginning. You started your career as a civil servant 40 plus years ago. You were a sub collector in the Malabar district. I can't imagine that you were thinking 40 years from now, I'll be representing India at the G20, and of all things, really talking about digital infrastructure. What does it mean for you to be such an ambassador?
Uh, so, uh, you know, well, I'd never envisaged when I started my career, and one of the challenges in my earlier part of my career was to transform lives of traditional fishermen in Kerala, and I could provide them outboard motors. I could provide them, new fishing crafts, fiberglass crafts. They could go much further into the sea. I could get them new fishing nets. But opening their bank account was a nightmare. It used to take me 8, 9 months to open a bank account. Chasing physical bank managers, know your customers. Today, we open a bank account in less than a minute using biometric. So I've seen this transformation taking place. And during, all these years, I've seen India evolve as a big player. I've seen a lot of leakages in government schemes. Today, we've ensured that no leakage takes place. And during the COVID period, we could do 2.2 billion vaccinations, which is totally cashless and paperless. So I've seen vast amount of billions coming into investment in the tech space in India, many unicorns getting created, many startups launching, largely, and India becoming the startup capital now, largely because of the technological innovation that has taken place. And therefore, my view is I'm absolutely convinced that, if we have to make a difference to the lives of citizens across the world, it has to be on the basis of technology, and it has to be on the basis of digital public infrastructure. At the end of it, leaders across the world want to make a difference. They are elected politically to make a difference to the lives of citizens. And there's no better way to transform the lives of common man than to create digital public infrastructure in different countries, particularly the global south.
That's really touching. I mean, amazing to see in just the span of your career that you were advancing low tech, fiberglass boats in the beginning of your career to now this kind of technology that can transform lives. I want to recognize that India, of course, has put DPI in the spotlight, on the agenda. I'm certainly hearing about it all the time here in Washington, D.C. And yet the presidency rotates, right? The summit is in September, and I can't help but wonder what comes next. How do you sustain the momentum, and what are you hearing from Brazil and South Africa about this agenda for future years?
So, Priya, our efforts this year will be to see DPI becoming an integral part of not just the G20 agenda going forward, but beyond. The benefits are clear. We can deepen inclusion, we can improve efficiency of service delivery, we can solve the challenges of the world by leveraging technology. There is no doubt in my mind that India's tech-enabled digital public infrastructure model, we'll have to work with countries across the world and help drive digital inclusion at an unprecedented global scale to change lives of citizens. We'll continue to do this in subsequent presidencies as well.
Well, and the imperative right now in this kind of post-COVID, high inflationary environment, food crisis, I mean, the imperative right now to think about digital public infrastructure for all of the economic setbacks, for better preparedness and response to climate action and climate change and weather-related crises, just seems now is the moment, and we very much wish you luck. I want to go back to something you just said about how leaders are all elected to help people. And while, of course, India is the world's largest democracy, and you have these robust institutions, the court system and a thriving free press and so on and so forth, that's not the case all over the world. And I think it's worth us at least noting that these powerful systems you're describing have to be governed and in a way that protects people and protects their data. And of course, the democratic institutions around them must be strong enough to prevent any sort of misuse.
No, absolutely. That is why we built up this techno-economic solution and said that the data must belong to the citizen and there must be data empowerment. So we came out with the data empowerment protection architecture, which ensured that the data belongs to the citizen. So every single DPI that we built up, whether it was the Jam Trinity, whether it was the utility DigiLocker, whether it was Bharat Bill Pay, whether it was fast payment, whether it was vaccination COVID, whether it was toll collection FASTag or digital collection GST, or digital OPD through eSanjeevani and the e-governance services, Umang app, all of them, or in education, Diksha and Swayam, all of them, the National Health Stack and Swayam and all this, every single one, we've ensured that the data belongs to the citizen and that the data empowerment protection architecture takes care of that legal issue, which it's a techno-economic legal solution on a real-time basis. Real-time basis, the citizen takes approval of the citizen. The citizen gives approval on his mobile or on his iPad or on his computer. And on a real-time basis, you are able to do that in just about a couple of seconds.
Yeah, well, I'm so glad you say that because too often we feel like the emphasis is on the technology and not the legal part of it or the safeguards part of it. And I think that has to be part of the messaging for everyone to get really behind, especially in this day and age where the concerns are rising. So we have only about 6 minutes left here. I want to make sure I'm asking you the questions you want me to ask. Is there anything else I should be putting on the table that you want to address?
No, so I just wanted to say a couple of things. One is that the platforms which India have built up, they actually provide the privacy of data for the citizens is the key. Secondly, there's a techno-economic legal framework at the back of it. And thirdly, when we talk about public sector, we are talking about public interest, and that there is a huge amount of private sector innovation.
Right.
And all these have grown because there's private sector innovation constantly. They are built to scale and they serve over 1 billion people in 22 languages. And also that India has been able to solve the challenge of digital inclusion by taking a platform approach, by mainstreaming digitization and tech across all schemes of government. And, this is a new approach. This will create a new economic divide between countries who are leapfrogging ahead on digital public infrastructure approach versus the rest. And we should not allow that divide to occur because the world, this is the model for the rest of the world to follow. The digital public infrastructure model where citizens own their data, private sector innovates, open source, open API, interoperability is the way forward.
Well, and it's as we were talking about over lunch a couple of weeks ago, the the world is digitizing, right? It's not as though we're all sitting around in the Stone Age and you choose between that and DPI. The alternative is to have systems where data is kind of hoarded and siloed. It's controlled by, one or few actors, that the opportunities for surveillance are much greater. India, I think, is showing that if you invest in these protocols for data to be shared securely, and that for people to have greater control and agency over data, and that, as you said, businesses can thrive on top of it, it's really a striking example of what's possible, and I think it should be celebrated. It's really quite remarkable. Do you think people are in your discussions, are people understanding these, or is India really unique because of just how much IT and technology is part of the ethos of India? And here you are talking about open APIs as a government official, which is not the norm. Are people understanding the message and understanding that at the end of the day, we are talking about these distributed systems, not centralized systems, that the alternatives are far worse?
Yeah, no, so Priya, that's why we thought that evangelizing is very important, uh, because these are all platforms built on an alternative model on principles of openness, equity, inclusivity, fairness, and trust. And therefore, it's very important that we evangelize, we educate everybody, we tell them that because of this model, India has been able to do 11x more fast payments than what USA and Europe do, and we do 4x more digital payment than what China does, and that we do about 42% of the real-time fast payments in the world. China does about 18%. It's all been possible because of UPI and allowing interoperability and allowing open innovation to take place. And
Right.
therefore, it was very important for us to do a lot of side events, like in Cochin and like in Washington and many other places of the world, where we were able to educate people on the transformational idea, and the brilliance of many of these DPIs lie in the enabling architecture built out as a public good.
Right.
It is, when we talk about public good, it's important to explain that public good is equal to public interest. And
Public interest, yeah.
yeah,
Well,
that
and I don't mean to interrupt, but I think some of the striking examples actually of the uses aren't just in the payment space, but came out of COVID. Could you just take 1 minute and share with the audience what all of this infrastructure really allowed India to do, and how citizens were helped in the height of the pandemic?
So, firstly, on the vaccination, we created CoWIN, and we were able to do 2.2 billion vaccinations, paperless, cashless, totally paperless, cashless. We wouldn't have been able to do such vast scale of innovation without CoWIN. Then we did a digital OPD. Everybody could do, mobile digital consultations through e-Sanjeevani, which is again like a digital OPD. And we did about 8 billion consultations. 8 billion consultation means that the entire world population, actually, many Indians did it several times. And thirdly, we were able to put money straight into the bank accounts of the citizens. 800 million Indians got money straight into their bank accounts without any leakage, straight into their bank account. We could do that. So we didn't give out large packages, which then lead to inflation, and then lead to many other challenges. Now, the tightening of the interest rates. Rather than that, we took money and put it straight into the bank accounts through the digital process of using just the digital public infrastructure, and there was no leakages. So vast number, and we pushed for. Because many people could not step out. All supplies were taking place because of digital transactions. through the mobile. So we were able to reduce the cost of transaction and the cost of acquisition of customer. Before the COVID, it used to be about $25 per customer. It has fallen to as low as $1 per customer now in terms of digital acquisition. And that is important. And that will help create many business models.
Sherpa, Amitabh Kant, you have been so generous with your time, and it's really inspiring to hear these stories, and the numbers are astounding. It's truly a story to be told, but more than that, to really be understood, because there's a lot of detail under India's DPI journey that still need to be really understood by others, so we're not misinterpreting the agenda and the approach. We are so delighted at Dial to be a partner to you in this journey, and wish you all the best in the negotiations and the discussions, and look forward to having you maybe next year as we can hear what came next.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Greatly appreciate it.
All right. Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Great pleasure. Wonderful.